Mike pulled the last poblano off the flame just as the bell over the diner door gave its fussy little trill. He set the pepper in the bowl with the others, covered it with a plate to let the skin steam loose, and wiped his forearm with the back of his wrist. Lunch rush had thinned to a mild hum. 2 nurses sharing fries, a father bribing a toddler with a strawberry milkshake, Mr. Davison in his usual corner reading a paperback with a cracked spine. The air smelled like coffee, char, and lime. Mike liked that combination. It smelled like choices made with intention. "Hi," someone said, breathless in that polite way that meant desperate. Mike looked up. The man at the counter wore a white shirt with the sleeves neatly rolled and a tie loosened just enough to suggest he'd tried relaxation and found it overrated. His hair was cleanly parted, his eyes the soft blue of a swimming pool in shade. He had a leather folder tucked under one arm and a small stack of lists clipped together in his hand like he'd brought his own control. "Can I help you?" Mike asked, skeptical and a little charmed against his will. "I really hope so." The man glanced at the poblanos as if they might vote. "Our caterer's freezer died this morning. We have 200 guests arriving at the museum for a donor's preview in 6 hours, and I'm out of options. Your name came up 3 times when I called in favors." He paused, collected himself. "I'm Samuel, events manager. I can pay rush rates, and I can beg if necessary." The folder and the tie said he was good with spreadsheets. The bruise of worry in his voice said he was good with people. Mike slid the plate off the bowl and let a coil of pepper steam rise between them. 200 is an ungodly number, Mike said, because he liked to lay the ground truth down first. "But what's the menu?" Samuel's relief looked like a muscle unclenching under his cheekbone. "We were promised small plates, seasonal, elegant. The trustees like recognizing ingredients but not having to pronounce them." Mike grinned despite himself. "So not the habanero chicken lollipops I was about to pitch?" "Maybe for the brave," Samuel said, and the corner of his mouth did something quick and wry. "We're 2 blocks away. I can get volunteers to run. We have platters and a budget." He slid a sheet across the counter, already itemized, already resigned to the math. Mike scanned it. It wasn't terrible. He did his own mental inventory, what was in his walk-in, what he could brine fast enough, what produce the market truck could drop if he called Leo, who owed him 3 favors, and a back rub. "Okay," he said. "We can do citrus poached shrimp with fennel and orange, crostini with whipped goat cheese and charred scallion oil, mini arepas with black bean puree and pepita crumble. It's erring toward Latin, since I'm roasting my heart out already. But we can pivot. You allergic to nice things?" "I love nice things," Samuel said, sounding like he meant it. "I'm also allergic to donor meltdowns." "Good. We'll avoid those too. I'll need half up front for supplies and the rest net 5, and someone who can carry trays without eating all the crostini on the way. I can find 4 someones," Samuel said. He slid a credit card over like it was a lifeline. "If you save me, I'll owe you." Mike took the card and, because humor was a reflex when sincerity wanted too much, said, "Careful with that phrase. I have a long list of petty needs." He meant it as a joke. Samuel set his lists down and, to Mike's surprise, actually listened. "What's one?" he asked. Mike almost said a decent mop because his had a wobble, but what came out was, "A boyfriend for the couple's cook-off." Samuel blinked. "That's a specific mop." "Welcome to my brain." Mike folded the receipt. "The incubator kitchen downtown is giving a year's free rent to the winner. It's a couples competition. I have the menu and the knives, and the competitive streak. I do not, however, have a boyfriend. And I do not want to call my ex," he did not add, because the sentence tasted like metal. Samuel's expression shifted from crisis to curiosity. "Couldn't you team up platonically? They can't require romance to rent a kitchen. They can require vibes." Mike spread his hands. "It's a marketing scheme with a stove. They want stories, lovers who cook, kiss, and promote on Instagram." I can fake affection, but I prefer not to fake consent. Samuel's mouth tilted. An ethical scoundrel? How refreshing. Tell your trustees, Mike said, and reached for the peppers. Anyway, if you're really feeling grateful after tonight, I'll accept payment in the form of one tidy, spreadsheet-loving man who can be convincingly into me for 3 public appearances and at least 1 practice dinner. He expected a laugh or a polite deflection. Samuel looked at him a full beat, like the idea walked into the room and took a chair. I have a problem, Samuel said, softly now. Separate from the freezer. My ex is on the museum board. He assumes my entire life is temporary. I've told everyone I'm happy and thriving. They've invited us both to the gala in 2 weeks. I was planning to bring a book as my date. Bold, Mike said. He didn't ask why the ex had that kind of access to Samuel's life. He could guess. If I help you with your ethically sound scam, Samuel continued, his lists shuffled into a new stack. Will you be my boyfriend at the gala so I don't die under fluorescent concern? Mike's laughter ran ahead of his brain, surprised and bright. You're proposing. A barter. Fake dating? Mutual benefit? Samuel said. We set rules. Mike pretended to think, mostly because the yes had landed in him too quickly. He liked the neatness of Samuel's tie and the way his voice had softened around the truth. He liked that the idea didn't feel like a con, but like an experiment. He liked, unhelpfully, the pool blue of his eyes. Rules, Mike agreed. No lying about big things. We don't touch unless we agree first. We debrief after each event. If either of us hates it, we bail. And a safe word, Samuel said, deadpan enough to make Mike snort. Rosemary, Mike offered, thinking of sprigs and restraint. Samuel nodded like he was writing it down in a mental ledger. Rosemary it is. They shook on it. Samuel's hand was warm, steady. The buzz of the diner settled into a new key as if it approved. First, Mike said, rolling his sleeves higher. We save your event. Then we practice not being disasters together. Samuel exhaled, some of the panic leaving his shoulders. 9 in the morning, I'll send volunteers, never late. Me neither, Mike said, and meant it, and didn't know yet that the thing he was making room for wasn't just canapes, but also a future with a seam he couldn't wait to look at in perfect light. By 4 o'clock, the museum smelled like citrus and nerves. The lobby's white marble threw back a bright, forgiving light that made even the most exhausted volunteer look composed. Mike worked the line he'd built from nothing in 3 hours. Tempura shrimp tossed through orange zest and fennel fronds, goat cheese whipped to clouds and ribboned with scallion oil, mini arepas crisping in cast iron. He called orders like he did in his kitchen, clear, steady, a metronome for panic. Samuel moved through the chaos with a clipboard and a calm that people stepped into like shade. He swapped empty platters for full ones, intercepted a trustee with a complaint long before it found a mouth, cracked a joke low enough to make a volunteer's hands stop shaking. Every few minutes, his orbit swung near the kitchen doors and his eyes found Mike's. He didn't have to say anything. Approval lifted his mouth, and Mike felt the click of a team settling into place. Behind, Mike called, slipping past with a tray. Corner, Samuel answered automatically. They smiled. It felt like learning a language both of them had always secretly spoken. At 7, the donors arrived in a tide of silk and practiced laughter. The museum's new exhibition, metalwork and light, glowed like someone had bottled a sunrise. Mike's food went out in elegant waves. People made approving noises and then approving donations. A harried intern reported, breathless, that someone on the board had called the mini arepas suggestive of community, which was a sentence Mike decided to take as a win. 3 more trays of shrimp, Samuel said, ducking his head into the kitchen. And someone has kidnapped the goat cheese with the scallion oil. If you see a ceramic bowl with a green swirl and gilt, apprehend it. Yes, officer, Mike said, and spooned oil over fresh clouds. He didn't see the X until he heard the tone. It was the kind of polite that has corners. Samuel, the the man said, right outside the service doors. Your crisis management has improved. I was certain we'd be serving pretzels. Samuel's spine straightened half a degree. Adrian, he said, and the name sat in the air like something that had been left out too long. Adrian was in his late 30s, immaculate suit, smile honed. He had the look of someone who'd learned people were easier to manage if they were grateful first. He lifted a shrimp from a passing tray and examined it as if evaluating a resume. Charming, he said. I didn't realize you were outsourcing. Taste now. Mike stepped through the doors with a fresh platter and the prickly calm he reserved for critics and broken ovens. He didn't touch Samuel, but he stood close enough that the heat off his arm said, with no ambiguity, mine to stand with. Hi, he said friendly. I'm Taste. Adrian's smile flicked toward Mike, measuring. And you are? Mike, the caterer. The reason no one is eating pretzels. He let himself grin just enough. If you need a gluten-free option, I can find you a carrot. Samuel's laugh was small but real. He angled himself more squarely beside Mike. Adrian serves on the board, he told Mike. He also enjoys starting conversations with the weather and then becoming the weather. Cloudy with a chance of condescension, Mike said lightly. Adrian's mouth didn't quite tighten. Well, I'm glad you found help. Samuel's fingers brushed the back of Mike's wrist, a question. Mike answered by turning his hand, letting their fingers line up, not interlace, just rest. Adrian's eyes flicked down and then away. The power in that small, agreed-upon touch startled Mike with its clean, quiet click. Enjoy the exhibit, Samuel said, soft as a door closing. Adrian moved off, swallowed by a woman in emerald silk complaining about parking. Mike exhaled. Rosemary, Samuel asked under his breath, a small smile, checking in, invoking their silliness on purpose. No, Mike said. Basil. Spice of satisfaction. Wrong plant, Samuel said, but the joke did what it needed to. The worry line between his brows smoothed. The rest of the evening ran like a train you'd finally mended. People ate, complimented, took photos. A trustee cornered Mike to ask if he did weddings and if he could convince her son to marry someone, anyone. He promised nothing and handed her a crostini. At 9:30, the last champagne flute went clink, and the crowd thinned to the sound of tired heels. When the doors shut behind the final donor, the lobby felt like a place that had held breath too long and remembered how to let it out. Volunteers stacked platters. The harried intern returned the goat cheese, sheepish and blessed with a smear across his cheek like war paint. Samuel appeared at the kitchen door again, but this time he didn't need anything. He leaned a shoulder to the frame, loosened his tie an honest inch, and just looked at Mike like seeing him was better than exhaling. You saved me, he said. You saved yourself, Mike answered. I just brought snacks to the party. That is the definition of saving, Samuel said. Also, I owe you, and we have a contract to fulfill. Ah, yes, Mike said. Our mutual scam. Samuel's smile turned careful. Would you come upstairs? The new rooftop terrace? No donors, just the skyline. We can debrief. They climbed the stairs past metalwork that caught light like tricks. The terrace opened to a night the color of ink dropped in water, slow and velvety. The city was a constellation of small, practicable stars. Mike sat on a bench. Samuel sat, close enough that their shoulders acknowledged each other without argument. Okay, Samuel said, flipping to a clean page in a small notebook. Rules check, no lying about big things, touch by consent, debrief after events, Rosemary if anything feels off. And we bail if either of us hates it, Mike added. Samuel nodded. And we choose a story. I don't want to invent a past. I want to curate what actually exists. Mike eyed him. We met over a freezer apocalypse. You hired me. I offered you a mop/boyfriend. You countered with a barter. We shook on it. Too honest to be marketing, Samuel said, sounding pleased. But we can frame it. We can say we met in a crisis and he made me laugh and I thought, oh, that would be nice to keep. Mike swallowed. The night cooled the back of his neck. That's a framing I can live with. They picked logistics like picking herbs, with care. Farmers market together on Saturday, photos, soft launch, practice dinner next Tuesday at Mike's place, so Samuel could learn how to look like he belonged at a stove. The gala in 2 weeks, full performance. They'd put one candid on. Instagram, a plate and 2 hands, no faces. Comments would do the rest. Boundaries, Samuel said. Can I hold your hand in public? I liked the way Adrian looked when you didn't move it. You can, Mike said, and realized it was the easiest yes he'd given in a long time. Kiss? For the gala only, if needed, Samuel said, and his breath fogged the air just enough to make it easy to pretend the shiver was the night's fault. Practice. Later. They sat quiet a moment. In the gallery below, someone wheeled a cart. The sound chimed up like a clock finding its hour. What's your tell? Mike asked. My tell? When you're overwhelmed. So I know. So I don't push, Samuel thought. I make lists I already did just to cross them off, and I tug my cuff down until the seam screams. You? I make jokes with too many teeth, Mike said, and I chop too fast. Samuel nodded, absorbing it like a recipe note. Okay. They stood, because if they didn't, the bench might keep them, and whatever came next would be a different chapter than they'd agreed to. At the stairwell, Samuel reached for Mike's hand and didn't. Asked this time, but his eyes did. Mike laced their fingers, not for Adrian now, not for anyone who might be watching, just to see if it felt like a lie. It didn't. On the sidewalk, Samuel stopped. Thank you, he said again, simpler now. Don't be late Saturday, Mike said, which meant, I want to see you. I'm bringing a list of seasonal produce and a willingness to pretend we like figs. Who pretends? Samuel said, mock offended. I adore figs. I am a museum person. We worship fruit with backstories. Mike laughed, and the sound followed them in opposite directions, familiar already and waiting for the part where they'd turn back together. Saturday morning turned the farmer's market into a rumor of sweetness. Peaches breathed perfume, basil made the air green, and a beehive of dogs negotiated leashes at child ankle height. Mike arrived with 2 tote bags and a plan. Samuel arrived with a tote bag, a pencil behind his ear, and the kind of smile that looked like relief disguised as curiosity. Okay, Mike said, handing him a coffee. We stage 1 candid and 1 almost candid. Nothing says romance like project management, Samuel replied, bumping his shoulder lightly. What's our story angle? Figs? Obviously, Mike said. If we can't pretend to love figs, what are we even faking? They moved through stalls that shone like little galleries, Samuel reading labels as if they might tell him secrets about the grower's childhood. Mike haggled gently, greeted people by name, tucked rosemary, an actual plant, into Samuel's hands with a grin he didn't bother to hide. Insurance, he said. Careful, Samuel murmured. You're flirting with our safe word. Leo, the produce guy Mike had invoked as a conjurer of favors, clocked Samuel and raised an eyebrow. So this is the museum one. Behave, Mike warned. Leo's grin widened. I'm always polite to patrons of the arts. He offered Samuel a fig, deftly split. On the house, trial of devotion. Samuel tasted it with the seriousness of a judge. Textbook, he said. Tender, a little indecent. Mike swallowed a laugh that felt treacherously like fondness. They bought tomatoes that glowed like lanterns, corn furred with silk, a small jar of honey, the color of amber tea. Samuel tucked a modest spray of tulips into his bag, like a secret. For their soft launch, they chose a stall with good light and a lull in traffic. Mike plated a peach wedge with a coin of goat cheese and a basil leaf on a napkin, then held it so both their hands entered the frame. His, nicked and brown. Samuel's, clean and pale with a penciled smudge. Samuel clicked a photo that looked like a promise you'd believe. Caption, proofing. No faces. Comments could rehearse themselves. A vendor 3 stalls down, retired, chatty, blessed with an Instagram, asked if she could take one too. "You two look like Sunday," she said, which felt like a benediction Mike didn't know where to put. The photo went up before they'd cleared the peaches. Samuel's phone hummed. He glanced, thumb pausing, then handed it to Mike without making a face out of it. Adrian. "Cute PR. If you're going to leverage your personal life for the museum, at least wear something Hugo. Coffee Monday to discuss optics." Mike felt his jaw go heat-tight. "Do you want to rosemary that?" he asked, gentle. "No," Samuel said, and tucked the phone away like a paper cut he refused to lick. "I want to buy mushrooms and continue having a morning." They sat on, a low wall to share a plastic clamshell of strawberries and a croissant that flaked recklessly. A little boy pointed at the rosemary plant and announced to no one that it was a tree. Samuel laughed, the kind that doesn't perform. "Thank you," he said after a minute, quieter, "for standing where my ex's weather can't get me wet." "You don't owe me a mop," Mike said. "But if you keep bringing me into the sunshine, I won't object." They brushed hands once on purpose. It felt like making room. Tuesday. Samuel arrived at Mike's apartment with a new mop, sleek, self-wringing, the Cadillac of domestic compromise, and a bottle of wine with a label so quietly tasteful Mike wanted to frame it. He wore an apron Mike had lent him, strings tied in a knot at the back that Mike redid without thinking. The nearness made the nape of Samuel's neck go warm. Mike stepped back before the obviousness of it could write itself into the air. "Couples cook-off practice," Mike said, brisk. "We'll do rosemary lamb, fig pan sauce, please enjoy the on-brandness, and a corn-tomato salad. Your job, knife skills, stirring with confidence, and pretending my playlist is unimpeachable." "I like your playlist," Samuel said, eyeing the chalkboard wall with "this week" scrawled in loops. "I like your apartment." "It's small," Mike said. "It looks like someone lives here on purpose," Samuel replied, running a finger over a row of neatly hung copper pans. "That is not how my place feels." Mike showed him the claw for safe chopping. Samuel's first attempts were cautious but precise, like he was negotiating with each sprig. "Think rhythm," Mike said, laying his hand lightly over Samuel's, knuckles to angle them. "Let the blade slide. Don't fight the board." "You're very calm," Samuel said. "I've made all the mistakes you're afraid of," Mike answered. "Most of them twice." They found a groove. Samuel's plating was exacting and elegant. Mike's seasoning hit the note that turns okay into O. When the lamb rested, Mike degreased the pan, added a breath of wine and a spoon of honey, swirled in figs and rosemary until the sauce went glossy. He handed Samuel a tasting spoon. "Tell me when it's too sweet." Samuel tasted and considered like a man writing a good email. "It's not. It's honest." Something eased under Mike's ribs. Halfway through plating, his phone chimed. The incubator. Reminder, video intros due by midnight Friday, 30 to 90 seconds. Tell your story. Show your dynamics. "Please do not throw knives." Samuel tilted his head at the email, then at Mike. "Do we fake a meet cute?" "We tell the truth and edit for charm," Mike said, propping the phone against a jar of wooden spoons. He hit record. "I'm Mike. This is Samuel. We met in a freezer apocalypse." Samuel took over without stepping on him. "He saved my event. I offered him a barter. Now we cook together and try not to lie to each other. We like figs. We respect rosemary." Mike grinned, and Samuel went soft at the edges in a way a camera liked. They stopped the recording at the moment their shoulders brushed, and the moment wanted to become something else. Debrief? Samuel asked. Because rules existed for a reason. This is weird, Mike said, and then because honesty had been part of the contract, it's good weird, not bad weird. Same, Samuel said. He lifted a corner of the apron like he might salute. What are we allowed to admit before the gala? That I like you, Mike said, the bravery easier while he held a ladle. That I don't want to pretend if... Real is on the table, Samuel's breath caught. He set the ladle down like it might otherwise go to pieces. Same, he said again, and then laughed, a helpless little sound. Originality is not my strong suit tonight. Mike reached without overthinking and stroked a thumb across Samuel's mouth, chasing a glossy smear of sauce. He meant to pull back. He didn't quite. Rosemary? He asked, and for once it wasn't a joke. Samuel's eyes met his, clear as the museum glass at noon. Not Rosemary. The kiss was careful the way new bridges are, tested by weight and weather, built anyway. It was warm and a little sweet, tasted like fig and decision. Mike felt the click of something that wasn't pretense slot into place, like a shelf finding its bracket. They separated while it still felt like a choice. Both of them stepped back and smiled with their hands, the kind that admitted the rules had changed and they'd be the ones to rewrite them. Debrief, Samuel said again, breath steadier. We didn't plan that. It didn't feel like a lie. It didn't, Mike agreed. We don't have to post it. God, please don't, Samuel said, laughing properly now. Let's keep that one for the museum of our own. They ate at the counter, knees bumping, the lamb so perfect. It felt a little smug. When Samuel left, he stood in the doorway longer than necessary, rosemary plant tucked under his arm like a private joke. Don't be late for the gala fittings tomorrow, he said, which meant, I'm ready to be seen with you on purpose. Me, neither, Mike said, and watched him go with the sudden certainty that late had already been replaced by something else. Right on time, right where he wanted to be. Chapter 4. Opening Night. The tailor slid the last pin into Mike's jacket, stepped back, and let out a small, involuntary sound. Samuel, who had been pretending not to stare, failed spectacularly. You clean up upsettingly well, he said. Mike turned toward the mirror. The suit wasn't Hugo anything. It was a slate blue that made his skin look warm and his eyes darker. The line of it said, he could plate a fig and also negotiate with a landlord. You're biased, he said, and then saw Samuel in his own charcoal suit, tie the gentle blue of museum light, and lost the high ground. Okay. You're a whole exhibit. Samuel's laugh was the quiet kind that moved through his shoulders. I can live with being untitled, soft blue 2025. They practiced their gala cues in the mirror, how to stand close without crowding, the way Samuel's hand could find Mike's elbow when someone cornered them, the way Mike could read the tug of Samuel's cuff as a tell. It felt like learning steps to a dance they'd invented from common sense and kindness. 2 weeks later, the museum turned itself into a night sky. The lobby's marble caught starbursts from hidden lights. A string quartet test drove the first song with the tenderness of people who know they're about to be background to something important. Volunteers flashed smiles. The new rooftop terrace would open at midnight with a quiet toast. The donors arrived on a tide of expensive fabrics and carefully practiced ease. Mike and Samuel arrived together. The murmurs started immediately, the good kind that belongs to people who love a narrative. Some of it was their soft launch photo. Some of it was the way they looked at each other like a secret told at a reasonable volume. Ready? Samuel asked at the bottom of the stairs. Never late, Mike said, because it had become a promise. They did the rounds. Samuel was the event's orbit. Mike became the gravity he'd needed last time. He watched the way people softened when Samuel remembered their kids' names, the way he slid compliments across like appetizers, small, sincere, delicious. Mike answered questions about the food, deflected a proposal to cater a destination wedding in Iceland, and stole a look every few minutes just to steady himself. Adrian found them by the metalwork gallery, a wine glass in one hand and a practiced smile in the other. He took them both in like a committee. "Samuel," he said, "warm as a winter sun, you can't stand under long. Mike, you cleaned up." "We did," Mike said. "Turns out suits exist." Adrian's eyes flicked to their joined hands and back. "I didn't realize the museum had branched into performance art." Samuel's fingers tightened fractionally. Mike shifted a pressure point at his elbow that meant, "I've got you, not I'll do this for you." Samuel's smile wasn't sharp. It was honest. "It's amazing," he said, "how much easier everything is when I stop worrying about what you think." A small, perfect silence landed and dared anyone to pick it up. Adrian blinked. "We were going to discuss optics on Monday." "No, we weren't," Samuel said. He didn't wrestle. He set a boundary on the table and left it there. "The museum's brand isn't my personal life, and my personal life isn't available for comment." Adrian's mouth thinned. He nodded, faux gracious, and retreated into a conversation about donor tears with a man who pronounced philanthropy like a continent. Mike looked at Samuel. "Rosemary?" he asked, low. Samuel shook his head, relief unclenching something under his ribs. "Mint," he said. "Fresh." They found a quiet pocket near a window where the city made itself a promise. The quartet slid into something slow. Couples formed the idea of a dance. Samuel tilted his head. "Do we," he asked, "have any rules about waltzing?" "Only that I will step on exactly one of your toes," Mike said, offering a hand. Samuel took it. They moved in a small circle in a corner of the world that was suddenly generous. Mike counted quietly under his breath. Samuel followed a beat late and then perfectly. They weren't good. They were easy. "I like the part where we tell the truth and then see if it survives lights and music," Samuel said. "Same," Mike murmured into the tender space near his ear. At midnight, under the terrace's new canopy, the director raised a glass. Samuel's speech was brief and exact. "Thank you for believing that what we hold matters," he said, "and for letting us make room for the new. Tonight and always, we're building something we want to stand under." He didn't look at Mike when he said it. He didn't have to. 3 days later, the couple's cook-off buckled the community kitchen under a giddy amount of heat and hope. The room smelled like garlic and nerves. Cameras were modest, judges local celebrities with opinions about parsley. Mike set up their station with the calm of a man who'd known a freezer to die at dawn. Samuel lined up spoons with military precision and breathed like a yoga instructor who'd just learned how to dice an onion. "Our story," the host said, microphone bobbing. "New couple, classic flavors, figs, rosemary." "We're consistent," Mike said to laughter. They worked the way they'd practiced, call and response, behind, corner, hot, yes, chef. Samuel's hands shook exactly once, when the pan flared too brightly under the camera. Mike laid his palm on the small of Samuel's back. Anchor, not ownership, and felt the tremor level out. "Rosemary," he whispered, "a joke and a lifeline." Samuel smiled, steady now, not even close. They plated rosemary lamb with fig pan sauce and a corn and tomato salad that tasted like July, making a case for itself. Their video played on a small screen. Them laughing in Mike's kitchen, the line about meeting in a crisis, the part where Samuel says, "We try not to lie to each other." The room made the sound people make when they recognize something. That might last. The judges walked the stations, nodding, tasting, pretending not to angle for camera time. At their table, the chef from the high-end bistro closed his eyes at the sauce. "It's honest," he said, and Mike had to look away for a second, because sometimes the universe writes your lines back to you. The announcer did the big drum roll without a drum. Second place went to a pair who'd met at a spin class and weaponized avocado. When the host called their names, Mike's first thought was something nuts like, oh. Of course. Samuel's hand found his, their fingers interlaced like they'd been practicing since small. They won. It wasn't flashy. A plaque, a bouquet that made the rosemary plant at home look like an imposter, and a gigantic keycard to the incubator kitchen. The crowd clapped like they'd just watched a structure tested for weight and pronounced sound. Outside afterward, air cool on the back of his neck, Mike leaned against the brick and stared at the ridiculous keycard like it might tell him where to put his heart. Samuel stepped in front of him and held out both hands like a scale. "Contract," Samuel said, voice soft. "We agreed to fake this for 2 public appearances and at least 1 practice dinner. We're at, what, 13? I want to renegotiate." Mike's laugh came out like it belonged to a younger, less defended man. "You want to extend the term?" "I want to change the category," Samuel said. "From performance to life. No safe word unless it's funny. New rules. We tell each other the truth even when it's inconvenient. We don't use each other as weather shields except by explicit request. We show up. We don't get late to us." Mike reached up and smoothed Samuel's tie with unnecessary care. "You're very good at contracts." "I'm suddenly very bad at pretending I don't mean them," Samuel said. "Good," Mike said. "Me neither." They kissed there in the alley behind a community kitchen that now belonged, for a year, more to them than to anyone else. It tasted like heat cooling and something beginning. When they finally came up for air, Samuel laughed, unguarded and new. "Debrief?" he asked, half out of habit. Mike shook his head. "Just brief me on when you want to come over and hang that giant keycard above my stove like a ridiculous altar." "Tonight," Samuel said. "Never late." "Right on time," Mike agreed. And this time the words weren't a bit or a joke. They were exactly what they were. A promise that found its hour and took it. If Mike and Samuel's fake dating to real love story made you smile, like, comment, share, and subscribe, never late for more.